Hi guys, thank you all for coming. Sorry about the wait, it takes a while to get everybody in. But yeah, thank you all for joining. In case some of you haven't been here before or if you just need a reminder, I'm Lottie and I do these workshops on behalf of Empower Our Education, who are a tutoring company that tend to work with lower income families to provide them with quality help with their education that everybody deserves and not having to pay a ridiculously high price for it, especially in times with COVID where everything's so much more uncertain and people need a bit of extra support. I think it's a really great idea that you can have a much cheaper tutoring company to help you with this kind of thing. And also like things like this, which are free, that just give you an extra boost with what you're learning. I know that a lot of people have had exams in the past week or so. So if you've had any of those, I hope they've all gone really well. And just remember not to worry about anything because it's teacher assessed as well. And there's no telling what can happen and everything will be absolutely fine. But yeah, this workshop as long oh this workshop as well as many other workshops are being recorded to put on YouTube as well. But don't worry, like none of your faces or anything are in it. It's just to put on YouTube. So if you want to rewatch it or if anybody else wants to rewatch it, then you're more than welcome to. So yeah, go and subscribe to the YouTube. It's Empower Out Education, and I'll show you the other social medias as we get into the PowerPoint. But for today's workshop, we are sorry, 1 second. Yeah, for today's workshop, we are doing English language, which we haven't done before because we've mainly been doing English literature books. So I'm very excited to do this because I really enjoyed doing my English language papers when I was doing my GCSEs. But yeah, as we go through it, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box and I'll just answer them at the end because it just makes everything so much quicker and more efficient if we're not constantly stopping to ask questions. But it makes it easier to remember them if you just put them in the chat box when you think of them, and then we can go through them at the end. So yeah, we're looking at English language paper 1. And as it says down here, the Instagram is Empower Our 1 and the Facebook is Empower Our Education. So like, follow, subscribe to everything because there's so much information about things that are coming up and like little competitions you can do. There is a short story competition. I'm not entirely sure if it's closed yet, but if you want more information on that, please check out the Facebook because there's really good prizes that you get for winning that. And it's like a one-on-one call with a specialist. So I'd really recommend if that's something that you're interested in. But yeah, let's get started. So English language paper 1, the first thing I thought we could look at is what the actual exam is going to look like. You have 2 English language papers. We're looking at number 1, which is explorations in creative writing and reading. It is 1 hour and 45 minutes, section A and section B. Section A is the section we're looking at today, which is kind of the looking at an extract and analysing it and answering some questions on that, which you tend to spend about 45 minutes on. And then section B is the creative writing part, which you spend about an hour on, where you write your own stories. I'm sure you're all aware. There's 4 questions for section A. Oh, sorry, I need to admit people into the waiting room. There we go. Yeah, question 1 is only worth about 3 or 4 marks. That doesn't say 3/4. Sorry, I just realised how that might look a bit confusing. It's worth 3 or 4 marks, and you tend to be quoting it straight from the text, or very much inferring it straight from the text. It's bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. It's nothing to worry about. Don't spend any more than 5 minutes answering it because it's not worth that many marks. And now the PowerPoint's frozen. This always happens. But yeah, what it's going to tell you is that question 2 is an 8-mark question, and I don't know why it's not working. Yeah, question 2 is an 8-mark question, which tends to be on a little snippet from the text that you're given. Oh my gosh, can you please load? There we go. Yeah, it's worth 8 marks. It's answering a question based on an extract from the text. No more than 10 minutes to be spent answering it, and it tends to be based on either the language used or the structure used and the effects that has on the reader. Question 3 is quite similar, but it's based on the entirety of the text instead of a little extract. And if question 2 was about structure, then this one tends to be on language, or vice versa. If question 2 was on language, this one tends to be on structure. And again, no more than 10 minutes because a good way to try and time yourself is the amount of marks it is, round it up to the nearest 5 or 10. So like in top one, 3 or 4 marks, 5 minutes, 8 marks, 10 minutes, 20 marks, 20 minutes, or even 25 if you need it, and so on. And question 4, which is the longest question in section A, is worth 20 marks. And it's usually based on one section of the text, but not like a little extract. It's like, it might tell you the second half of the text or from lines, such and such and such and such, to give you a more specific window to look at. And they tend to be a to what extent do you agree questions. So they'll give you a statement and you have to just give an answer based on how much you agree with that statement, including arguments from both. And like it says, no more than 20 or 25 minutes to be spent answering. And this, I did email this to you. So whether this works is a different story in itself, but it was too long of an extract to just put on the PowerPoint. So I thought I'll try and be a bit clever, try and be a bit thrifty with this. Oh my gosh, it worked. Fantastic. So I put it on a Word document with a link, and I know you can all read, but just for my own peace of mind, I'm going to read through it just to make sure we're all on the same page here. So, at the corner of Oxford Circus, Rosabelle bought a bunch of violets, and that was practically the reason why she had so little tea, for a scone and a boiled egg and a cup of cocoa are not sufficient after a hard day's work in a hat shop. As she swung onto the step of the bus, grabbed her skirt with one hand and clung to the railing with the other, Rosabelle thought she would have sacrificed her soul for a good dinner, something hot and strong and filling. Rosabelle looked out of the windows. The street was blurred and misty, but the light striking on the panes turned their dullness to opal and silver, and the jewellers' shops seen through this were fairy palaces. Her feet were horribly wet, and she knew the bottom of her skirt and petticoat would be coated with black, greasy mud. There was a sickening smell of warm humanity. It seemed to be oozing out of everybody in the bus, and everybody had the same expression, sitting so still, staring in front of them. Rosabelle stirred suddenly and unfastened the two top buttons of her coat. She felt almost stifled. Through her half-closed eyes, the whole row of people on the opposite seat seemed to resolve into one meaningless, staring face. She began to think of all that had happened during the day. Would she ever forget that awful woman in the grey mackintosh, or the girl who had tried on every hat in the shop and then said she would call in tomorrow and decide definitely? Rosabelle could not help smiling. The excuse was so worn thin. There had been another girl, a girl with beautiful red hair and white skin and eyes the colour of that green ribbon shot with gold that they had got from Paris last week. Rosabelle had seen her carriage at the door. A man had come in with her, quite a young man, and so well dressed. What exactly is it that I want, Harry? She'd said, as Rosabelle took the pins out of her hat, untied her veil, and gave her a hand mirror. You must have a black hat, he had answered, a black hat with a feather that goes right round it, and then round your neck, and then ties in a bow under your chin, and a decent-sized feather. The girl glanced at Rosabelle laughingly. Have you any hats like that? They had been very hard to please. Harry would demand the impossible, and Rosabelle was almost in despair. Then she remembered the big, untouched box upstairs. Oh, one moment, madam, she'd said. I think perhaps I can show you something that will please you better. She had run up breathlessly, cut the cords, scattered the tissue paper, and yes, there was the very hat. Rather large, soft, and with a great curled feather, a black velvet rose, nothing else. They had been charmed. The girl had put it on and then handed it to Rosabelle. Let me see how it looks on you, she said. Rosabelle turned to the mirror and placed it on her brown hair, and then faced them. Oh, Harry, isn't it adorable? The girl cried. I must have that. She smiled at Rosabelle. It suits you beautifully. A sudden, ridiculous feeling of anger had seized Rosabelle. She longed to throw the lovely, perishable thing in the girl's face, and then bent over the hat, flushing. It's exquisitely finished off inside, madam, she said. The girl swept out her carriage and left Harry to pay and bring the box with him. I shall go straight home and put it on before I come out to lunch with you, Rosabelle heard her say. So that is the whole extract, as I think I attached it in the email, so hopefully you had a chance to read through it and didn't have to just listen to my droning voice the whole time. But, I need to move this to the side now. These are the AOs for this whole kind of section. So AO1, as it is in always, is picking out ideas and points from the text and select and synthesize evidence from different texts, which means synthesize means like to push out the ones that you don't want and choose very specific ones that are going to suit your text better. AO2, language and structure and how it supports the points that are being made. AO3 isn't so necessary in this one, but it's comparing writers' ideas and perspective as well as how they're conveyed across two or more texts. And AO4, which is my favourite one, is the evaluation and kind of arguments that come within it and that discussion that you have in your own text. So I thought quickly we could have a look at question 1 because that's only 3 or 4 marks, in this case it's 4, which was read again the first part of the source from lines 1 to 5. List 4 things about Rosabelle from this part of the source. And if you've got your extract in front of you or anything, then feel free to have a look and think of what your answer would be. But I wrote down that she bought a bunch of violets, she worked in a hat shop, she was getting onto the bus and she was hungry. Because as it says, it's a very quick, short answer. It really didn't take that much effort. You literally just read the text and pick out exactly what it says. It's the easiest question in the whole text. It's just to make sure that you've actually read it and kind of interpreted it. So yeah, that one's always quite a nice question. I skipped over question 2 and 3, which are the 8 markers, because even though they are important, they're very much focused on either language or structure, which is fine, but that's a lot easier for you to kind of read through and interpret yourself. And question 4 includes language, structure, analysis, all of it all together. So I thought this would be a much more effective question to go through together, considering it's worth more marks as well. So it's quite a long question, or it looks it. Focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source from line 19 to the end. So it's the different section, like we said. A student said, this part of the story, set in the hat shop, shows the red-haired girl has many advantages in life, and I think Rosebud's right to be angry. And as it says again, to what extent do you agree? In your response, you could consider your own impressions of the red-haired girl, evaluate how the writer conveys Rosabel's reactions to the red-haired girl, and support your response with references to the text. And this is how you get a level 4, which is the highest amount of marks you can get in this. So you show perceptive and detailed evaluation, you evaluate critically and in the detail and effects on the reader, show perceptive understanding of the writer's methods, select a judicious range of textual detail, so quotes, and develop a convincing and critical response to the focus of the statement, which is more the AO4, like critical. You're picking out both the good parts and the bad parts, the agree and the disagree. How to answer. Some points that you can consider are the differences in wealth between the two women, physical appearances of the women, and the impact of the character's social class, which all comes under AO1, which is explicit and implicit interpretations of ideas. You could speak about the use of adjectives to create divides between the women, the third-person narrative inviting the reader to sympathise with Rosabel, and the structure moving from personal reflection to dialogue. So by that I mean it starts off where you're kind of in Rosabel's head, you're understanding that she's hungry, she's on the bus, you're kind of, even though it's not first person, you're in her thoughts, you're getting an insight into her mind, which means that as it goes into the dialogue, you're more inclined to sympathise with Rosabel because you've had that insight into her mind and how she thinks already. Which is AO2, which is the use of language, structure and form to impact interpretations. And like I said, AO3 isn't so important with this, so I move straight on to AO4, which, as I said, is my favourite, arguments and evaluation. And this is just basically saying that if you want to get a really good mark in this essay, you need to include a discussion in it, because it's well and good if your argument is, I agree with this statement. That's fine. Write 6 and 9, a million paragraphs of how you agree. But if you don't include one where you understand the opposition's argument, you're not going to reach top grade because you're not including that discussion. It's to show that you've got a well-rounded idea of what the question is asking you and of the text, and you're able to kind of pick out the opposition's argument and undermine it further to boost your own. And this is the most important part in any essay like this. So some points to consider would be the advantages of the red-haired girl, the writer's use of colour to convey the girl's vibrancy, the differences between the red-haired girl and Rosabel, and whether or not Rosabel's anger is justified, which I think is a really important point for this whole thing. So that's when we move on to essay structure. The introduction is always very, very short and concise for this question because it's only 20 marks, and it's not like something like an Inspector Calls or Macbeth where you've studied this in a lot of detail. You get into this exam, you open your exam paper, and that's what's in front of you. You don't know what it's going to be before you go in. So they're not expecting you to write a massive long paragraph for an introduction, literally just a sentence, maybe 2 if you can get that much out of you. It's just laying down your argument as how you're going to structure it and just laying out the point you're going to make. So for example, I just wrote, although Rosabel's anger towards the red-haired girl is somewhat understandable, it cannot be entirely justified. And then I just explained how it's not as important as it may be in essays about books that you've actually studied. Paragraph 1 is using AO1 and AO2 to make your points, the analysis of everything. Remember the questions. Now, this is something that a lot of people, including myself, always forgot to do. They'd ask me a question at the top, and I'd answer it for 1 or 2 paragraphs, and then I'd be off on a complete tangent. I wouldn't be referring back to the question at all. You have to remember that they don't care about anything other than what the question is asking you. So always try and keep in mind, we're trying to figure out to what extent Rosabel is okay to be angry with this girl. Always remember that that's what we're going for. Oh gosh, I need to move this to the side more. There we go. So I wrote, although Rosabel's anger is understandable, it is not entirely justified, even though the red-headed girl does appear to have many advantages in life that Rosabel may not. She has wealth, beauty, and happiness, all characteristics of a privileged lifestyle, and the writer's use of colour to describe her beautiful red hair and a white skin and eyes the colour of the green ribbon shot with gold implies that she's also radiant, vivacious, and exotic. This is in direct contrast to the brown-haired Rosabelle, who can only dream of being like this. This demonstrates that Rosabelle was envious and maybe even resentful, which is why her anger is understandable. So we've got the kind of points up here and the argument. So although it's understandable, it's not entirely justified. That's the argument. That's the AO4. Is going, I get why she's doing that, but I don't know if she should be doing that. It's providing that discussion that examiners really want to see in your essays because it shows that you understand different interpretations of the text. We've got quotes, so we've got our AO1, we've got AO2, where is it? Yeah, about how like it's describing her kind of thing. It's the language used to describe her that provides us with that. Paragraph 2, and then any other paragraphs that you include. Of course, I'm not going to go through and do every single paragraph with you because that would just get boring for you. But it's the same concept as paragraph 1. So I wrote, when Rosabelle tries on the hat, the key sentence, let me see how it looks on you, is significant because, just for one moment, their lives overlap. In a way, Rosabelle is being taunted with the symbol of another, much better life, but this is not deliberate, which is why her sudden, ridiculous feeling of anger is not entirely justifiable. The adjective sudden implies the fury comes out of nowhere, as if Rosabelle has no control over it, and ridiculous suggests it's unreasonable to the point of being absurd. So again, AO4, we've got, which is why her sudden ridiculous feeling out is not entirely justifiable. AO2, language, got adjective, stuff like that. AO1, quotes, ridiculous, feeling of anger, sudden, etc. So it's, as you say, it's not babbling on for paragraph after paragraph because you do only have about 20 minutes to write this answer, which is more than enough. It just means that you can't go on for page after page after page if you want to get all your points in. Then after you've written all of your point paragraphs, you finish with a conclusion. So you summarise what you've been saying the whole essay, and this is where you really, really, really draw on your 804 and you evaluate and argue here. This is where you go, although I see it like this, I also see it like this. This is the perfect place to do that. So as an example, I wrote, although it can be seen to some extent that Rosabelle is understandably angry, her feelings are not completely justified, as the red-haired lady is seen to cause her no harm and acts very politely around her. The girl does have many of life's advantages, but she is a product of her upbringing in much the same way as Rosabelle, and is not to blame for the class divisions in society or the way Rosabelle reacts to her character. This is where it's also very important to make sure that you're referring back to the question. So remember, the question is, to what extent is Rosabelle's anger justified? Include the word extent. If that's what it takes for you to remember to refer back to the question, include I agree to some extent, I agree to a full extent, I agree to no extent. No matter what your argument is, show that you remember that question. And yeah, then you'll be absolutely fine. That is all I got for the PowerPoint because I obviously only did one. Well, I did 2 questions, but I only did one in detail. So that was super quick. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box now so that I can go and answer them if you have any. But yeah, and then the section B of this paper is creative writing, which we can do a workshop on as well. So actually, that's another thing. If you want to do a workshop on creative writing, if you could just drop a comment in the chat box, that would be really helpful as well, because I feel like that's something that people just assume they know how to do because it is creative, it's much more personal, but there are some key things that you can always pick out. Yeah, fab. Okay, we can do that next week if that's of interest to anyone, just because it makes sense to do it section A and then the next week section B. But yeah, if nobody has any questions, then I guess that's it. That was so fun. A creative writing workshop. Yeah, of course I can. Okay, yeah, we'll do that next week. I'll send you all an email with that on as well. And also, if you want because I skipped over question 2 and 3, like I said, the 8 markers. If you want those questions, feel free to email me and I can send them over to you. And if you just want to do like a practice answer, I can mark them. I can send you mark schemes. I can send you practice like papers and stuff like that. Like, so if you need anything to do with this kind of thing. Was this PowerPoint on this first section of paper 1? Yes. Paper 1, section 8 on creative writing. And then English language paper 2 is, because this is fictional, Paper 2 is transactional, which is just non-fiction, so stuff like letters, articles, reviews, newspapers, that kind of thing, just the more formal stuff. Speeches quite a lot of the time. And then the creative writing is they'll give you like imagine you're working at a hotel and the manager's being rude to you. What's the letter that you'd write? Like, you're writing a more formal thing. So yeah, if that's also another thing you'd be interested in going over in a workshop, please do let me know about that as well, because I'm more than happy to do that. Or at any point, just send me a quick email with what you want to do, and I can definitely fit that in. Can we go back quickly to the analysis bit before the essay? I missed that bit, sorry. Of course we can. Let me grab this. Here we go. Before the essay. We didn't do a full analysis. We just went through the AOs. So I'll get these up. Never mind, no, I won't. Here we go, yeah. So we just went through the AOs, which are, as always, AO1 is the points and information that you're presented with, and selecting quotes, which is the evidence that we're talking about here, that really back up your points. AO2, as always as well, language, structure, form, and always remember the effect on the reader. Because it's fine to say they use an adjective, they use a simile, but if you're not explaining the effect that that has on the reader, then there's no point in mentioning it. AO3, I said it's not too important to think about it, more kind of, if this is going to be included, it's going to come more naturally. It's not something you really have to think about because you're not studying two texts at the time. And then AO4 is evaluate text critically and support this with appropriate textual references, which is argument and evaluation, and the kind of providing a discussion in your work to show that you understand the text fully, which this is what we did for question 1, which was the just quick answers, short and concise. But this is what we wrote for, sorry, I'll go through it. I'll just go through all the points to consider again. So some of them for AO1 are differences in wealth between the two women, physical appearances of the women, and the impact of the character's social classes, which is the explicit and implicit interpretation of ideas. For AO2, it's the use of adjectives to create divides between the women. The third-person narrative, inviting the reader to sympathise with Rosabelle, and structure moving from personal reflection to dialogue, which is the use of language, structure, and form to impact interpretations, as we were talking about. And I don't know what part you were here for, but what we were saying about the structure moving from personal reflection to dialogue is the idea of, at the start of the extract, you are, even though it's a third person narrative, you are being presented with Rosabelle's internal workings. You're getting an insight into what she's thinking. You know that she's on the bus, she's tired, she feels dirty, which provides us with more sympathy for her as the text continues, because we already know that information about her. And then this is the AO4, which is the most important part, which is where you include that discussion in your work. And some points for this were the advantages of the red-headed girl, the right use of colour to convey the girl's vibrancy, the differences between the red-headed girl and Rosabelle, and whether or not her anger is justified. But yeah, we didn't really do a proper, what do you call it? I've completely forgotten the word. Analysis, sorry. Could you please speak? I'm so sorry. I always ramble so much when I do these. Yeah. I can also send you over the PowerPoint over email if anyone wants it, to just kind of go over in a bit, like in your own time as well. And also because there's a lot of stuff to do with the mark scheme on there, feel free to just email me with anything that you need. But yeah, if you have any more questions, then pop them in the chat box now. But if not, then just email me if you need anything, any kind of practice papers about anything, any mark schemes, example essays, anything like that, anything that you want to do in other workshops, just anything, because bottom line is I'm here to help you with your English. I'm working with a company that wants you to do well in your exams, and that doesn't stop as soon as I finish the workshop, that continues. Yeah, I'll send the PowerPoint to everyone, and you've always got the extract. But yeah, if no one else has any questions, then is the questions to see so we can do it? Yes, I'll give you all the question stuff. I'll send you the whole paper over actually, and then anything that you have some questions about, you can email me back about, or anything, just you can answer some of the questions that we didn't answer. You can write your own answers. It's completely up to you. But yeah, if there's nothing else that anybody wants to talk about, then I can leave it here, if that's okay. Feel free to email me, like I said. But other than that, thank you guys for joining. And hopefully I'll see you in next week's workshop, if that's something that you're going to be interested in.